Unexpected crossing. The first time Dominic Rourke noticed Nora Willoughby, she was arguing with a banker on her phone, pacing outside a small bakery with faded gold lettering that read, Willoughby and Sons, at 1937. Her chestnut hair was coming loose from its practical bun, and her flour-dusted apron suggested she'd been interrupted mid-work. Dominic hadn't intended to stop. His driver had taken a detour around construction, bringing his Bentley through this unremarkable neighborhood where brownstones needed repointing and small businesses struggled against chain stores. He was due at a board meeting in 30 minutes. Pull over, he said suddenly, surprising even himself. The woman ended her call and pressed her palms against her eyes. That small, defeated gesture struck something in Dominic, a memory perhaps of his mother's similar posture the day they'd lost their home when he was 11. Before his fortune, before Rourke Technologies revolutionized sustainable energy storage, before Forbes named him among the 50 wealthiest people alive. Sir? His driver Jensen questioned through the intercom. Wait here. Dominic straightened his bespoke suit jacket and stepped onto the sidewalk. The woman looked up, startled by his approach. Her eyes were a warm amber reddened at the edges but dry. I'm sorry, we're closed today, she said, attempting a professional smile. I'm not here for pastries. His voice came out more brusque than intended. Social graces had never been his strength. Algorithms were far more predictable than people. I couldn't help overhearing. You're having financial troubles? Her expression shifted from politeness to wariness. That's hardly your concern, is it? Dominic appreciated her directness. Perhaps not, but I might be able to help. Unless you're offering an extension on a predatory loan or can convince Meridian Bank that a 100-year-old family business deserves more consideration than becoming another coffee franchise, I doubt it. She shook her head. I'm sorry. That was rude. You're just a stranger being kind. Dominic Rourke, he said, extending his hand. Recognition flickered in her eyes. The tech billionaire? He nodded once. Nora Willoughby. She hesitantly shook his hand, and while I appreciate whatever charity you're about to offer, Mr. Rourke, I'm looking for solutions, not handouts. I don't do charity, Ms. Willoughby, I make investments. He glanced at the bakery's window, where photographs showcased elaborate wedding cakes and artisanal breads. How much do you need to save it? She named a sum that would barely register in his quarterly interest earnings. And what would you do if financial constraints were removed? Something sparked in her eyes, not hope yet, but possibility. Modernize our equipment. Update our online presence. My grandfather's recipes deserve to be preserved, but the business model needs evolution. Dominic checked his watch. The board could wait. Show me your books. 20 minutes later, having reviewed hastily gathered financial documents at a flour-dusted table, Dominic made a call to his personal attorney. Draw up the paperwork to clear the debt on this property and arrange a business grant for renovations. Anonymous source. He ended the call before Nora could protest. Why would you do this? She asked, bewilderment replacing her earlier pride. Dominic himself wasn't entirely sure. Consider it an investment in preservation. Sometimes the old ways deserve protection. As he left, he firmly instructed Jensen to forget this detour ever happened. The matter was closed. A simple transaction, nothing more than financial first aid for a struggling business that had momentarily caught his interest. He had no way of knowing that in 3 days, when Nora Willoughby discovered her mysterious benefactor's identity, his carefully ordered life would begin its sweetest disruption. Gratitude's currency, the headquarters of Rourke Technologies occupied 37 floors of gleaming steel and smart glass that adjusted its tint according to the angle of the sun. Dominic's corner office on the top floor offered panoramic views of the city he'd conquered, but rarely took time to admire. 3 days after his impulsive detour, his assistant Penelope buzzed his intercom. Sir, there's a woman here insisting on seeing you. A Nora Willoughby. She's not on the schedule, but she's quite persistent. Dominic frowned. He'd ensured his involvement remained anonymous. Send her away. I tried, sir, she said, and I quote, tell him I know what he did and I'm not leaving until I thank him properly. He sighed. 5 minutes. When Nora entered, she carried a wooden box that filled his office with the aroma of freshly baked goods. She'd traded her flour-dusted apron for a simple green dress, her hair now hanging in loose waves around her shoulders. Your secretary thinks I'm either delivering food or attempting corporate espionage, she said without preamble. Neither explanation satisfied her. How did you find out? He asked, remaining seated behind his desk. Small neighborhoods have long memories. The barista across the street recognized your car. Then your lawyer wasn't as discreet as you might have hoped when he arrived to handle the paperwork. She set the box on his desk and opened it. Cardamom rolls. My grandmother's recipe. The secret is orange zest in the dough. Dominic regarded the offering with confusion. Ms. Willoughby. Nora. If you're concerned about repayment, that won't be necessary. The arrangement was made as a grant, not a loan. She smiled, revealing a small dimple in her left cheek. I know. I read every word of those documents twice. Which is how I know you also arranged for the renovation funds, despite telling me you were only clearing the debt. Dominic shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't accustomed to being caught in generosity. What I don't understand, she continued, is why. We're strangers. Billionaires don't typically rescue small bakeries without reason. Perhaps I have a sweet tooth, he replied dryly. Do you? Her amber eyes studied him with surprising intensity. No, actually. I prefer savory foods. Then I'll bring those next time. She pushed the box closer. These are for your staff. Sharing builds community. Next time? He echoed. I pay my debts, Mr. Rourke. Not with money, since you clearly don't need it, but with something more substantial. She glanced around his impeccably designed but impersonal office. When was the last time someone did something for you without expecting something in return? The question caught him off guard. In his world, every kindness had an agenda, every gift a hidden price tag. That's what I thought, she said softly. I'll be back next Thursday. My sourdough is legendary. Before he could formulate a response, she was gone, leaving behind warmth and confusion in equal measure. True to her word, Nora returned the following Thursday with sourdough and rosemary focaccia. Dominic had planned to be in meetings all day, but found himself curiously available when Penelope announced her arrival. Their conversation started awkwardly, his responses clipped, her determination unwavering. She spoke of her grandfather teaching her to knead dough at 4, of customers whose lives intersected with her family's for generations, of her dreams to honor tradition while embracing innovation. By her 5th visit, Dominic found himself looking forward to Thursdays. Her stories provided windows into a world where success wasn't measured in acquisitions and market share, where a perfectly proofed loaf constituted a victory worth celebrating. You never talk about yourself, she observed on her 7th visit, now comfortably settled in one of his office chairs, having brought a rustic vegetable tart that made even his executive chef curious. There's little to tell that isn't in the business journals. Those tell me what you've built, not who you are, she tilted her head. What makes Dominic Rourke smile when no one's watching? The question disarmed him. When had anyone last been interested in him beyond his wealth or influence? I restore vintage motorcycles, he admitted, surprising himself with the disclosure. In a workshop below my house. No one knows that. Her smile was genuine, warm. Now someone does. As she left that day, Dominic realized with startling clarity that these Thursday interruptions had become the brightest points in his calendar. More troubling still was the recognition that for the first time in decades, someone was seeing him. Not his fortune, not his power, but him. And he wasn't entirely sure he knew who that man was anymore. Autumn revelations. Golden light filtered through the ancient oak trees surrounding Dominic's country estate, casting dappled shadows across the gravel drive where his Aston Martin now parked beside Nora's modest sedan. The contrast between their vehicles mirrored the unlikely nature of their friendship, which had somehow endured through summer and into the crisp embrace of October. This isn't exactly the cottage in the woods you described, Nora said, stepping out of her car and taking in the sprawling Georgian manor house with its perfectly symmetrical windows and manicured grounds. Dominic shrugged, uncharacteristically self-conscious. It came with the land I wanted for my workshop. Of course it did, she laughed, the sound carrying across the autumn air. Most people just buy a shed. Their Thursday meetings had gradually extended beyond her bakery deliveries and his office. First to lunches in the private dining room of his building, then to evening walks through the botanical gardens, where she identified edible plants and he explained. The solar technology powering the greenhouse systems, this weekend retreat, had been his suggestion, an impulsive invitation, issued when she mentioned never having seen the countryside in autumn. To his surprise, she'd accepted without hesitation. "The workshop is this way," he said, leading her past the main house toward a converted stable. Inside, 3 vintage motorcycles in various stages of restoration gleamed under specialized lighting. Nora walked around a 1952 Vincent Black Shadow, running her fingers lightly over the handlebars. "They're beautiful, like functional sculptures." "They make sense," he said quietly. "Mechanical problems have solutions. Clear cause and effect. Unlike people." Her amber eyes found his, unexpectedly perceptive. "Unlike people," he confirmed. Later, as afternoon mellowed toward evening, they walked the perimeter of a small lake on his property. Nora collected fallen leaves in vibrant shades of crimson and gold, explaining how different varieties would imprint patterns on bread dough. "You see possibility everywhere," Dominic observed. "Occupational hazard," she replied. "Bakers are optimists by necessity. We have to believe things will rise." Something about her words resonated within him. Before Nora entered his life, Dominic had viewed the world through the calculating lens of acquisition and strategy. Yet here was someone who measured wealth in connections formed over shared food, in traditions preserved through generations, in the perfect crumb structure of a well-made loaf. As darkness fell, they sat before a fireplace in the less formal library, where leather chairs had softened with age and bookshelves climbed to the ceiling. Dominic opened a bottle of Bordeaux while Nora arranged a simple charcuterie board she'd insisted on preparing herself. "Tell me about the renovation," he said, handing her a glass of wine. "Is it progressing as you hoped?" Her face brightened. "Beyond expectation. The new ovens arrived Tuesday and the contractor says we'll reopen before Thanksgiving." She sliced an apple with practiced precision. "The neighborhood is buzzing with anticipation. 3 generations of families have celebrated milestones with our pastries. You're creating a legacy." "I'm preserving one," she corrected gently. "There's a difference." Firelight caught the auburn highlights in her hair, and Dominic found himself studying her profile with unfamiliar intensity. When had this woman, with flour perpetually under her fingernails and anecdotes about sourdough starters, become so essential to his peace of mind? "What about you?" she asked, breaking his reverie. "What legacy are you building?" The question unsettled him. His achievements were quantifiable. Patents filed, market share dominated, wealth accumulated. Yet suddenly those metrics seemed hollow. "I'm not sure anymore," he admitted. "That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me." She smiled, reaching across to touch his hand briefly. "Honesty looks good on you, Dominic." That night, lying awake in his perfectly appointed bedroom, Dominic confronted an uncomfortable truth. His impulsive financial rescue of Willoughby and Sons had inadvertently led to his own unexpected salvation. Nora's friendship, her genuine interest in the man behind the fortune, had awakened something long dormant within him. The revelation was both exhilarating and terrifying. Machines could be methodically restored, their functions predictable and controllable. But the unfamiliar warmth spreading through his chest whenever Nora smiled, the anticipation he felt for their conversations, these were variables he couldn't quantify or control. For a man who had built an empire on calculated risks, Dominic Rourke was suddenly facing the most unpredictable investment of all: his heart. Winter's test. The first snow of December fell in fat, lazy flakes that accumulated on the windowsills of Dominic's office. 37 floors up, the city appeared peaceful, its usual chaos muffled by winter's white blanket. But inside the Rourke Technologies boardroom, the atmosphere was anything but serene. "Thorne Global Investments has acquired 15% of our shares through shell companies," explained Vivian Liu, his chief financial officer. "Elliot Thorne is making a play for a hostile takeover." Dominic's expression remained impassive, though his mind raced through defensive strategies. Elliot Thorne had been his rival since their university days, first academically, then professionally. Where Dominic built, Elliot acquired. Where Dominic innovated, Elliot replicated and undercut. "Implement Protocol Aegis," Dominic instructed, "and schedule an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning." Hours later, after his executive team had departed with their urgent assignments, Dominic found himself staring at his phone, thumb hovering over Nora's contact. Their relationship had evolved into something undefined yet undeniable over the past months. Weekly visits had become daily messages, occasional dinners and long conversations that strayed far from business into personal territory. Before he could call, a text from Nora appeared. Strange day. Could use your perspective. Dinner tonight? They met at a small Italian restaurant they'd discovered together, tucked away on a side street where the owner knew them by name and respected their privacy. Nora arrived with snowflakes melting in her hair and worry creasing her brow. Someone wants to buy the bakery, she said without preamble, sliding into the booth across from him. A representative from Thorn Hospitality Group arrived with an offer this morning. Triple what it's worth. Dominic's blood ran cold. Thorn Hospitality is a subsidiary of Thorn Global Investments. Is that significant? Elliot Thorn is attempting to acquire my company through a hostile takeover. He paused, connecting the threads. This can't be coincidence. Understanding dawned in Nora's eyes. He's using me to get to you? But how would he even know about our connection? Elliot has always employed extensive corporate intelligence. Dominic's voice hardened. He's identified you as important to me. The words hung between them, an admission neither had previously voiced. Important how? She asked quietly. Before he could answer, their waiter appeared with wine. Dominic waited until they were alone again before continuing. I've made no secret of our friendship. You visit my office regularly. We've been seen together around the city. Friendship, Nora repeated, studying him with those perceptive amber eyes. Is that what this is? The question demanded honesty he wasn't prepared to give. What did you tell Thorn's representative? That I needed time to consider the offer. She frowned. But now I'll obviously decline. You should accept. Her eyes widened. What? Thorn is ruthless. If he can't use you as leverage, he'll find other means to pressure you. Dominic's tone was clinical, reverting to the businessman he'd been before her influence. The offer is generous. You could start fresh somewhere without complications. Complications, she echoed, hurt flashing across her features. Is that what I am to you? Nora? No. She set down her wineglass with deliberate care. Let me understand this. You swooped in to save my bakery, allowed me into your life, and now you're suggesting I sell everything my family built because it might complicate your corporate war. I'm trying to protect you. By deciding what's best for me without consultation? She shook her head. That's not protection, Dominic. That's control. The accusation struck with precision. Was he any better than Elliot, using wealth to manipulate outcomes? What would you have me do? He asked, frustration bleeding into his voice. Thorn will destroy anything I care about to get what he wants. So you admit you care, she said softly. Dominic fell silent, trapped by his own words. Listen to me carefully, Nora continued, leaning forward. I will not sell my heritage to anyone regardless of the price. And I won't be a pawn in some billionaire chess match, not even yours. She gathered her coat. When you decide whether I'm a complication to be managed or a person worth fighting alongside, let me know. As she walked away, Dominic realized he faced a choice more difficult than any corporate decision. Elliot Thorn threatened everything he'd built, but Nora Willoughby had quietly rebuilt him. The following morning, as snow continued to fall, Dominic entered the emergency board meeting with unprecedented clarity. On the table before each board member, he placed two folders, one containing a conventional defense strategy against Thorn's takeover, the other outlining a bold restructuring that would protect both Rourke Technologies and a certain historic bakery. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, today we make a choice about what this company truly values. For the first time in his career, Dominic was fighting not just to win, but to be worthy of something more precious than victory itself. The richest exchange, January's bitter cold, had given way to February's tentative thaw when Dominic stood outside Willoughby & Sons, watching through the window as Nora taught a child how to shape dough into a braid. The renovated bakery had become a neighborhood sensation, its blend of historic charm and modern efficiency, drawing both longtime patrons and curious newcomers. He hadn't spoken to her in 6 weeks, not since implementing his unorthodox defense against Elliot Thorn. The strategy had succeeded, though at considerable personal cost. Rourke Technologies remained under his control, albeit with a restructured board and a redefined corporate mission that emphasized community investment alongside technological innovation. The business press had labeled his actions everything from visionary to irrational. Stock prices had initially plummeted before stabilizing, at a more modest but sustainable valuation. Former allies had become critics. Unexpected supporters had emerged. Through it all, Dominic had honored Nora's request for space, though he'd monitored the situation from afar. When Thorn Hospitality attempted to pressure her through a campaign of minor bureaucratic obstacles, unexpected health inspections, parking restriction changes, supplier interference, Dominic had quietly neutralized each threat without her knowledge. Now, with Thorn's attention diverted to easier targets, Dominic finally found the courage to approach her directly. He waited until the bakery closed, then knocked on the door. Nora's expression registered surprise, then wariness as she let him in. "I wondered if you'd come." The renovated interior maintained its historic elements while incorporating subtle technological upgrades he recognized from his own specifications. Energy-efficient lighting cast a warm glow over reclaimed wood counters and state-of-the-art display cases. "You've created something remarkable," he said, genuinely impressed. "Thank you." She wiped her hands on her apron, a new one, embroidered with the bakery's logo but still dusted with flour. "Some things never changed. I heard about your victory over Thorn. Congratulations." It wasn't a victory so much as a recalibration. He met her gaze directly. "You were right, Nora. About everything." She leaned against the counter, studying him with those perceptive eyes that had seen through his defenses from the beginning. "Which part specifically?" "I've spent my life accumulating wealth, power, and influence, measuring success by metrics that ultimately meant nothing." He took a step closer. "Then you showed up with cardamom rolls and conversation, offering friendship without agenda. You saw me, not my resources or position, just me. You were always worth seeing, Dominic. You just didn't believe it. When Thorn threatened everything, my instinct was to sacrifice our connection, to protect my empire." His voice lowered. "Instead, I chose to reshape the empire to protect the connection." Understanding dawned in her expression. "The community investment initiatives in your new corporate charter, the Small Business Protection Fund, the historical preservation grants, those weren't just PR moves. They were my answer to your question." He took another step forward. "You asked if you were a complication or someone worth fighting alongside. I've spent 6 weeks restructuring my entire company to demonstrate that answer." The bakery was quiet except for the ticking of the vintage clock her grandfather had installed decades ago. Outside, twilight settled over the city, painting the sky in watercolor hues of lavender and gold. "That's quite a grand gesture," she said softly. "I've never been accused of subtlety." He smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "But the truth is simple. You changed me, Nora. You reminded me that wealth isn't measured in accounts or assets, but in connections and purpose. And what purpose have you found? To be worthy of the heart that saw value in mine." He reached for her hand, half expecting rejection. "If it's not too late." Nora interlaced her flour-dusted fingers with his. "The baker in me knows that some doughs need time to rise. The woman in me thinks you've risen quite magnificently." Later that evening, they sat at the small table in the bakery's kitchen, sharing fresh bread and possibilities. Dominic realized that his impulsive act of charity months ago had been the greatest investment of his life, not because it had purchased affection, but because it had opened a door he'd never known existed. "You know," Nora said, breaking off a piece of sourdough, "when you first saved the bakery, I thought I needed to repay you somehow. And now? Now I understand it wasn't about debt or gratitude." She smiled, that familiar dimple appearing in her cheek. "It was about exchange. You gave financial freedom. I offered something money can't buy." "And what was that?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "The chance to be known for yourself, not your wealth." She reached across the table to touch his face. "To be valued for your heart, not your portfolio." As winter stars appeared outside the window, Dominic Rourke, who had once calculated every risk and measured every return, embraced the most profitable loss of his life. In saving Nora's family legacy, he had found something far more valuable than all his billions: the courage to be seen, the capacity to care, and the priceless wealth of loving someone who loved him not for what he possessed, but for who he truly was. In the ledger of his life, it was the richest exchange he would ever make.